If you're anything like me, then last night you probably sat down with a warm drink and a good book, like you've done thousands of times before. But what if I told you everything you believe about your relationship with that book was based on a lie? A lie so profound that it almost cost our next guest her life. So please welcome to the couch the author of Literary Conspiracy, Miss Lollie Whitehill. You know, as well as I do, that getting you on this show is very difficult. We appreciate the risk that you've taken coming on. Just briefly, could you tell us about the violent reaction to your book? Authors and the publishing establishment believe that literary conspiracy threatens their business model. They want you to go on believing that you are entering their world, buying their product, playing by their rules. So, they've tried their hardest to shut me up. Court cases, vague threats, even life-threatening gifts in the mail. But I believe the people need to know. So for those viewers who haven't been able to read The Literary Conspiracy, could you please give them an overview of what it encompasses? Of course. This book is centred on the conspiracy of literature. A dynamic reader and the author are co-conspirators in the reading process, as together they defy and undermine the traditional literary conventions while simultaneously conspiring against those who are unaware of this defiance. Now tell me, the question that we've all been wondering, what gave you the inspiration to write such an imaginative piece? Well, that depends on whether you actually believe it to be imaginative or not. In fact, I believe it to be non-fiction. I see. So, where did you get the inspiration to write this? Well, Literary Conspiracy became a thought of mine following an engagement with Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveller. This book, like many others, plays with the concept of what it is to be a reader, and also what it is to be a text, and an author, and how all three have a dynamic relationship. David Mitchell from The Guardian describes the book as everything that A-level A Passage to India and As You Like It hadn't been, saying it is a meditation reading while dealing with writers and writing. The confronting self-reflexivity, which, might I add, is not simply a postmodern phenomenon, but is actually in every book, is exemplified in the book itself as a metaphor for the human mind. But, of course, only a dynamic reader would see this. Sorry, just for the audience members who aren't too sure, what are the dynamics of reading, as you call it? I can't answer that question. I can expand and elaborate on many of the factors that are involved, but the more you know, the more you realise there is still to know. And, as John Keats concludes with his notion of negative capability, sometimes you must be satisfied with having questions, like those, with no answers. I see, that's very interesting. So, as an author, what role do you have in shaping this dynamic reader? Were you conscious of this in your process of creating your book, Literary Conspiracy? Well, firstly, I was the author of Literary Conspiracy, but it's no longer my book. I am now just a reader, like all of you. Well, I mean, it is your book. No, it isn't. You see, yes, it is my role to manipulate language that creates this liminal realm. It is my role to play with the formatting that draws the reader in by evoking curiosity and challenging preconceptions. And yes, it is my role to create the metaphors that ground our metacognition, but this role was only mine while I was physically writing. It's no longer mine. Between the time that the book was mine and the time that it is now yours, between this time it was the editors, the illustrators, the publishers, the librarian or sales assistants, all of these influence of language that are known as paratext. This then extends into hypertext, where the text itself expands into other texts and other branches of research understanding. I'm sorry, paratext, hypertext. What? Yes. Let me give you an example. Tom Stoppard's play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, are dead. As in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern from the characters from Shakespeare's Hamlet. Precisely. And they're dead? Well, Stoppard is playing with the layers of reality for characters. Who are they, if not propagated by our minds? It is a play within a play, within a play, within a play, but the play is both paratext and hypertext for Hamlet, while Hamlet is at the same time both hypertext and paratext for it. And even the title is a form of paratext. When the book is shut, you can see the title Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and literally there is no life to them. But as soon as you open the book or the play, they are once again brought to life by our imagination. So let's backtrack. What does this have to do with the composer's role? Well, where I was getting to was that once these other influences begin to shape the meaning of the text, the author is metaphorically dead. Although I can't take credit for this term, Roland Barthes actually wrote the paper Death of the Author, in which the text is a tissue of citations resulting from thousands of sources of culture. The author is buried deeper every time we read, because the power of the reader's mind to create meaning derived from their culture gives them the ultimate authority. Authority? Authority to interpret the text in any imaginable way. And in this view, as the book explains, the author and the responder become co-conspirators. Calvino, the author I mentioned earlier, is very clever at using this, using rhetorical questions such as, will it happen this time, to further build this connection between himself as composer and the responder, almost as if he is like a friend meeting with us on the page. Lollie, you've really opened up a whole new dimension to literature that many of us readers have probably never thought of. Would you agree? Could you perhaps explain to us how reader agency is foregrounded as part of these textual dynamics? Absolutely. Although the reader is one of the many elements that are involved in the creation of literature, they arguably have the ultimate authority. The reader's identity, their culture, their values, their personality, their intelligence, everything that makes them who they are, all influence the way their brain deciphers the meaning of language in the fluidity of words. The most beautiful example of this is David Isay's Storycorps. Oh, David, he's been on the show before. We're all very familiar with Storycorps, but I didn't know that related to literature or the role of the responder. Yes, well, David explains in his TED Talk that every single life matters equally and infinitely, and that gives power to the individual. And this relates to literature because the narratives ingrained in the stories and the interviews support the metaphor of Storycorps being a metaphysical version of the process of storytelling. But in the interview, just like in a text, the responder completes the story, emphasising the dynamic continuum between fiction and reality. So to continue your idea here, this interview between you and I is just as much your interview as it is mine? Exactly. According to literary conventions, you are the composer here. But we're currently co-conspirators against this convention because aren't I composing this too? And better yet, aren't all of you deriving your own meaning and in that process composing? And even each of you, Nikki, Sab, Ernie, Tash, Izzy, Tate, Little Meg, don't all of you have a role in this composition? And that's exactly my point. The dynamism of language creates so much fluidity that finding a true meaning is completely intangible. But it is by blurring these layers of reality that cause a dynamic reader to value literature as a medium for human connectivity and in a state of heightened consciousness. To give an example, Calvino is a master in using language to demonstrate this exact thesis. The names of the chapters in Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveller string together to encompass the fluidity and transitional process of reading, resulting in an unanswerable question that demonstrates my exact message. If on a winter's night a traveller, outside the town of Malbork, leaning from a steep slope without fear of wind or vertigo, looks down in the gathering shadow, in a network of lines that enlace, in a network of lines that intersect, on the carpet of leaves illuminated by the moon, around an empty grave, what story down there awaits its end? Thank you, Lollie. So the next time you pick up a book and feel the weight of its substance in your hand, remember this: the only laws by which it is bound are the laws of gravity and of your own reckoning. Because without you, dear reader, the author is dead.